The Star Wars Expanded Universe, now called Legends, is filled with incredible stories, some of which feel as good as the movies themselves, if not better. But there are other stories that might not be as good as those stories. Many people have lots of problems with the expanded universe, for many reasons. The expanded universe is very overhated. So today, I would like to explain the context to these overhated stories in the expanded universe, and how they truly work in the Star Wars universe.
Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection.
Hello there, everyone. Today we will return to the list of the most hated Star Wars legend stories. Most of the hate from these stories come from people that have never read the stories. Today I will be explaining the context of these stories and how they fit into the large Star Wars universe and the larger sci-fi and fantasy genre. Let's start with a story that takes the fan favorite background character and elevates him to a godlike supercomputer. IG-88, the assassin droid introduced in The Empire Strikes Back, wasn't just a bounty hunter, but according to the short story Therefore I Am, written by Kevin J. Anderson, IG-88 didn't just survive past The Empire Strikes Back. He had a much bigger role. He had bigger ambitions. He duplicated himself into multiple bodies. He waged a secret war against the galaxy and even managed to upload his consciousness into an unfinished and unprotected second Death Star. That's right, by the time the rebels attacked the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, IG-88 was technically in control. He had planned to use the station's planet-destroying power to trigger a galaxy-wide droid revolution. But before he could make his move, the second Death Star was blown up, wiping out his consciousness along with it. This story takes Star Wars into a full-blown sci-fi horror territory. It leads into the themes of artificial intelligence rebelling against its creators, much like the Terminator and the Matrix movies. But unlike many AI takeover stories, IG-88 never got his grand moment. His schemes were wiped out before they could begin, making his story dark, but a fitting addition to the expanded universe timeline. It also sets up the idea of a droid revolution that gets explored in a number of other expanded universe novels, and would be a perfect doorway into exploring civil rights in the Star Wars universe without being on the nose about it. The Disney era tried something similar with this with their character L3-37 in the movie Solo: A Star Wars Story. Instead of a terrifying AI rebellion, we got a droid whose main personality trait was demanding equal rights. And then she got awkwardly uploaded into the Millennium Falcon, never to be addressed again, unless you count this.
Ugh, where is R2 when I need him? Sir, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has the most peculiar dialect. I'm afraid you'll have to replace it.
Of course I'll have to replace it.
While IG-88's plan added a real sense of dread and mystery, L3's story was played as laughs and had no meaningful impact. Next, let's talk about one of the weirdest deep cuts in the expanded universe, the Jedi Prince series. Written as a child book series in the early 90s, it introduces something shocking. Palpatine had a family? With the release of Return of the Jedi in 1983 expanding the Star Wars movie saga from a space opera to a family space drama, this opened the door for more stories to be told about family dramas from the famous characters. Everyone got a family drama. Han and Leia started a family. Luke had to face the reality of not only building a new Jedi Order, but also training his niece and his nephews in the ways of the Jedi. Eventually, Luke got married and then had a family. Lando got married and had a family. And even Boba Fett had a family. In the Jedi Prince book series, we see the development of the family drama of the Palpatines. Enter Trioculus, a three-eyed mutant who claimed to be the Emperor's son. He sought to claim his father's throne and wield the power of the Empire. But as the series continued, we learned the truth. Palpatine's real son was a man called Tricyclops, a peaceful scientist. Tricyclops had a dark upbringing. He was rumored to be the son of Palpatine's advisor, Sly Moore, who was very interested in the experiments of Darth Plagueis. We are led to believe that she was given the DNA of Palpatine. How this happened was never explained. Allegedly, she died after giving birth to Tricyclops. After this, he was trained and raised by an old Darkside cult called the Prophets of the Darkside, with the intent of being the Emperor's eye, an extension of Palpatine's will. However, Palpatine began to fear that he would become more powerful than him, and sent him to an Imperial insane asylum on the mining world of Kessel. In the asylum, Tricyclops fell in love with a nurse, Kalina, a Jedi princess, who has been forced to serve the Empire in the asylum. Fan theories have it that she was a Jedi that belonged to a royal family, or a long line of Jedi royals that date back to the time of Darth Bane in the New Sith Wars, when Jedi Lords governed the galaxy. After some time, they conceived a son, Ken. Ken would then be taken and raised on a hidden Jedi stronghold on Yavin 4, and he was meant to be the last hope of the Jedi Order. The Jedi Prince books had a bizarre, almost fairy tale quality to them, feeling more like a 1980s Saturday morning cartoon than a traditional Star Wars story. But in the greater sci-fi and fantasy genre, the idea of hidden heirs and long-lost royal bloodlines is a classic trope. If given more time, the idea of Palpatine's lineage could add a rich layer to the Star Wars mythos. The expanded universe writers were known for taking bizarre ideas and stories and working them into the greater Star Wars universe. Many of you know that Disney took the idea of Palpatine having a descendant and botched it completely. The Jedi Prince books got referenced quite a few times in Star Wars theory videos before the completion of the sequel trilogy. The first time I heard about Palpatine having a secret error was in a Mark Zero video. Of course, now we know in Episode 9 it introduces Rey as Palpatine's granddaughter, with no setup and no explanation, and no meaningful impact to her character arc. Instead of exploring the idea in a meaningful way, they just drop it in there at the last minute as a lazy twist, making it one of the most controversial decisions in the sequel trilogy, turning the Skywalker saga into the Palpatine saga. But before The Mandalorian brought him back in live action, he had already escaped the Sarlacc pit before, in the Dark Empire comics. But even before that, he was brought back in the old Marvel Star Wars comics. In issue 81, a few months after the events of Return of the Jedi, we see Fett washed up on the desert sands of Tatooine, barely alive. He's discovered by the Jawas, who mistake him as a droid and load him into their sandcrawler. But fate isn't kind to Boba. Han Solo ends up crossing paths with these Jawas, and in the chaos, the sandcrawler crashes, sending Fett back into the Sarlacc pit. In a certain point of view, this paints Fett as a legend, someone too tough to die, but cursed by fate. It keeps his ego intact while giving fans a satisfying tease of his survival, setting up future stories where he would escape for good. Of course, this comes off a little cartoony. However, we should keep in mind that the Sarlacc can digest someone for 1,000 years. Fett is one of the few characters that had died on screen that would be most likely to return on that fact alone. Unlike these other characters. I'm sure you all know this, but in the book of Boba Fett, we finally see Fett escape from the Sarlacc, and then do nothing about it. Instead of being a feared bounty hunter, he spends most of the show aimlessly wandering, getting beaten up, and failing to reclaim his reputation. Instead of a hardened survivor, we got a character who was unrecognizable from his previous portrayals. This last topic is something that completely baffles me that anyone would bring up. Perhaps the most shocking moment in the Star Wars Legends timeline was the death of Chewbacca. In the novel Vector Prime, the first book in the new Jedi Order series, we see an alien invasion unlike anything the galaxy has ever faced before. The Yuzhongvan. These extragalactic warriors wield organic technology and were immune to the Force. In their first major attack, they cause a planetary catastrophe that led to Chewbacca's heroic sacrifice. This story plot point gets brought up countless times when discussing the worst of the expanded universe. First off, I would like to say that when this book was released, there was panic all over the fandom. For the writers, this idea was not taken lightly. The main idea was to have the series start off with a main character's death. In the documentary Crafting an Epic, The Making of the New Jedi Order, the editor put together every interview from everyone that worked on the series. In these interviews, the creators tell us that the death they had in mind was Luke Skywalker. However, George Lucas had turned down this idea along with the original draft, telling the creators that they could not kill Luke, Leia, or the droids, because he had some ideas of returning to the timeline after the prequels. So the team had to rework their vision. They asked the question, if they killed any character, how would the rich cast of characters react and continue to be developed? Choosing Chewbacca worked as the perfect death for the story. His death impacted every main character. Chewie died saving Han Solo, Han Solo's son Anakin, along with many others, saving as many lives as he could before being crushed by a fallen moon. It was one of the most heartbreaking and impactful deaths in Star Wars history, changing Han Solo and every main character forever. This was the only death that they found that would take the main characters in a different direction, along with setting the stage for the Yuzhongvan being a real threat, and that not every character was safe. This idea was thrown into the trash with the release of the sequel trilogy. Each movie shows the death of each member of the Big Three. Their idea was that each character would have their own movie and then die at the end of it. Han is regressed as a character and then killed off, and then forgotten by every other original trilogy character after they make one comment of his death. Luke is regressed off screen because of something not shown, then dies of a Force overdose with no setup. He killed himself instead of going into his X-Wing and helping his nephew.
I find it the irony of Luke dying of an overdose of the Force. Who knew that was a thing? Obi-Wan should have said, use the Force in moderation.
Yoda would have said that, I think.
Use the Force, but don't overdo it. You know, Yoda, they should have told me. There was no warning. Who knew you could OD on the Force?
Then Leia is a Jedi Master with no setup except for her one flying scene. She also overdoses on the Force, very disrespectful, instead of getting into the ship and helping her son. In the last one, we get a fake-out death, where it seemed like Rey accidentally killed Chewie, but he was fine. It was a cheap, meaningless moment that had no real consequences. Unlike the powerful, lasting impact his death was in Legends. They missed a moment to have some character development with Rey. These stories may be legends, but they prove that Star Wars was once bold and willing to take risks. All these fans like to mock these stories without the greater context. I hope this was insightful and that you got a better context of these stories. What do you think? Do you have any more ideas of stories you would like me to cover? Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you for watching.